Hey folks, how you doing? Stevie Camboris here, otherwise known as Cambo Trout, and today I got something special for you. We have a new project going on, and that's going to be with a bunch of guys. I'll name them each individually in a moment, in a project we're calling Chesapeake Outdoor Sports. Now it's going to be about 6 guys total, hunters and fishermen alike, and the goal of our new project here with this new collaborative effort, see links in the description, is going to be to bring you tips, tricks, gear recommendations, all of the above, for hunting and fishing in the Chesapeake Bay area and beyond. What I'm going to do to kick things off today is give you the basics of what you need to start snakehead fishing. Because if you've watched my channel at all, you know that's my chief addiction, there's no doubt about it. First up after me and my tips to get you started with snakehead fishing is going to be Mr. Sam Tudor of Outdoors in Maryland. He is at the Outdoors in Maryland YouTube channel. He's going to be giving you tips on how to fish for bass, largemouth bass specifically, in tidal waters, of which there are many in Maryland. Second person you're going to hear from is Mr. Grant Elliott with Chesapeake Bay Kayak Fishing. He's going to be giving you some tips on trolling for striped bass in Maryland. Third person you're going to hear from, Mr. Tommy Robinson of Amped Up Fishing, and he's going to be giving you some tips that you can use to start or improve on your carp fishing in Maryland. Fourth in the chute today is going to be Mr. Brandon Manchione, the Baltimore Angler. He's going to be giving you his tips on how to use the Santee Cooper rig. If you're not familiar with it, check it out. Great rig, especially for catfishing. And the last thing you're going to see today is a little outro, giving you a glimpse of some of the types of content and action you can expect from Chesapeake Outdoor Sports, coming to you this spring, summer, fall, and hopefully beyond. Now, one person you won't hear from today, but who's part of our crew, is Mr. Kevin Hogan. Unfortunately, Kevin right now is too wrapped up with planning the first Snakehead Expo. Look that up with a link in the description of this video. But we'll get him in there soon to get more of his content, especially on the hunting side of things, although he knows crabbing and fishing pretty damn well too. But hey folks, thanks for watching. Let us know in the comments section what types of things, what types of places, what types of species or activities with Chesapeake Outdoor Sports, what kind of things you want us to cover. Because that'll determine a lot of our content going forward so we can bring it to you. So folks, with no further ado, let's get to these fishing tips. Now, one thing that's universal pretty much throughout the year is going to be your rod and reel. Can you use fly fishing gear? Yes. Can you use bait casting gear? Yes. What do I prefer? There it is right there. Medium heavy action. The gear ratio on this reel is something I want to highlight, and that gear ratio is 6:2:1. The reason I highlight that is because you need to have a reel that can take up a lot of line quickly, because snakehead a lot of times will try to run right at you, and if you can't take up that line quickly enough, you're going to lose that fish, because after their runs or even during their runs, they'll do giant head shakes, strongest head shakes I've ever had on any fish I've caught. So you got to make sure you take that line up quickly. As far as the line goes, a lot of controversy here. The weight of the line that I use Suffix braid, and this is 20-pound test. Now, if you're fishing that really heavy cover, if you're casting deep into cover, you probably want to bump up to 40 or 50-pound test. I know a lot of guys that don't roll with anything less than 50-pound test. The next thing I want to tell you is the primary rig I use for snakehead when it's cold. So you're looking at late fall, early spring. And that's going to be finding the biggest minnows that you can find and fishing them about 12 to 18 inches, sometimes even shallower, sometimes like about 6 inches, underneath of a nice, big, easily seen float. The type of hooks you use, I know guys who use circle hooks. I know guys who use octopus hooks. I prefer octopus. I usually fish number 2, but if you want to go larger than that, I don't think it would be a problem. I wouldn't blame you in the slightest. But big minnows, biggest bait fish you can find. There's sometimes a year, if they're deeper, I'll fish it as low as about 3 feet beneath my float, but in the waters I primarily fish, that's as deep as I've had to go. As it starts to warm up, that's when you can start casting your MEP spinners or spinners like it. Number 3 or 4 is really good in the MEPS version. I've also had luck, especially early in the year, on swim baits, because again, early in the year, the snakehead will often be a little bit deeper than they otherwise would be, and then as the water warms, they'll start moving shallower. Something with some flash, some vibration, when they're just starting to come out of that torpor, just starting to come out of their low activity period, and they're starting to hit lures. Now, once it starts to warm up, you get towards the pre-spawn bite, almost anything's in the bag in terms of what the fish might want that day, but I'm going to give you a few key classes of lures that you need to have with you if you want to go snakehead fishing. You're going to want to get ready for top water moving bait season. Now, I've had my best luck on these once it's pretty darn warm out there, I'd probably say from the month of late April, early May, and then certainly through the fall until it gets a little bit too cold, and I switch over to minnows and such. But buzz baits, your Stanley rivets, chatterbait. I just want to give you the basic lure classes that you need. You want your spinners, your swim baits, buzz baits, top water moving baits, and lastly, perhaps most importantly, you want your top water hollow body style lures. Those lures that you can stop, let sit, walk the dog. Great lures to fish when those fish will take top water, but they don't necessarily want to chase down a buzz bait or a whopper plopper. So folks, I hope that gives you at least a glimpse into what you need for snakehead fishing to get started. And I'll do videos in the future along the lines of more of the specifics for the gear and types of lures that I use. First up after me and my tips to get you started with snakehead fishing is gonna be Mr. Sam Tudor of Outdoors in Maryland.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, I'm really glad to be part of the video, and I'm on my home lake right now, the Choptank River on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And if you notice, I don't have my boat, and the reason is because I have a bad tide, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. We're going to talk about fishing tidal water for largemouth bass. All right, stick around. So whenever my clubs, all the clubs I fish with, when we do our tournaments, whether you're going to the Potomac, whether you're going to Susquehanna, Sassafras, Pocomoke, doesn't matter. You're always looking for outgoing tide. Outgoing tide is the best tide. If you see an area and you got incoming tide, I mean, you'd probably be better off staying home and knitting a sweater, because that's be more productive. My great window, or the best window that I have had, is the last 2 hours of outgoing tide and the first hour of incoming tide. I took my buddy out fishing. We were just doing some catfishing, and I tied up to an area that I like. It has a bunch of trees to it. There's about 4 trees right in one area, and the tide was pretty much almost dead going out. I mean, it was pretty much slack tide, and I must have took my crankbait and threw these trees, I know, 100 times. Threw them, over them, it doesn't matter. And as soon as the tide switched, as soon as it switched and started going, bam. Within about 20 minutes, I had 2 3-pounders and 2 2-pounders. I caught 4 fish off the same trees that I was fishing with a crankbait because of the tide. That's what you're looking for. I'm gonna give you another little quick tip. Here's an aerial view of one of the areas I like to fish. And with the tide going out, this is where the arrow is coming out. I'm gonna face my boat into the tide. Now what I'm looking for, because largemouth bass, the rivers that I fish are pretty fast moving rivers, and largemouth are not going to sit in the current. They're going to find ambush points, and they're going to find what I call, or anybody calls, an eddy, a pool, or anything like that. So if you notice right here in this one area, I have a big tree that comes out, and what that's going to make is the water is actually going to go the opposite way and be a lot slacker. So if you look for them kind of places, whether it be land, whether it be rocks, it doesn't matter what it is. Sometimes in that nice little cool area of a river, you'll find yourself a bass. All right, Steve, thanks for letting me hang around. All right, see ya.
What's up, guys? Crazy Horse here for Chesapeake Outdoor Sports. For my segment, I'm going to be covering trolling tips for striped bass on the Chesapeake Bay. We're going to flip over to some on-the-water action here in a second and some tips. But I want to give credit where credit is due. A lot of my information that I've gained throughout the years have been through reading some of the books that I have right here. Really quickly, the 2 big ones are Alan Batista's book. This one is the Light Tackle Kayak Jigging the Chesapeake Bay, and another is his trolling book. So in terms of tips, if you're going to be doing this kind of fishing, that's the first step I do. I buy both of those books, read those, and you're going to be highly educated on fishing for striped bass. Another tip that I'd be remiss to leave out, and it's the moral tip. Right now, the striped bass population is really struggling. The Maryland DNR is not really doing it any favors. I would really encourage you guys to practice catch and release. Having said that, let's get to the footage, and it really covers trolling the Chesapeake Bay and the use of a sonar fish finder in the process, and how important that is, whether you're fishing from a kayak or from a larger vessel. Enjoy it, check it out, and leave comments below. Thanks for watching. Who says these things need to fatten up for spring?
That's a fat boy. I marked some fish really deep, and then I pulled the boat to a stop, and my left rod just went down. I've had this discussion with other fishermen before about whether or not a fish finder is a necessary and mandatory tool to have on a kayak with you. And for trolling, it is, because of this. Because a lot of guys aren't going to have a Torqeedo with a speedometer on that. But for no other reason, you got to know how fast you're going. And it's got a speedometer right here. I've got two, one on the Torqeedo and one here. But as I said, most people aren't going to have a Torqeedo. And they're paddling or they're pedaling, and against tide and current, or with tide and current, you have no idea how fast you're going. So if for no other reason than to have a speedometer on the boat, for trolling, you just gotta have a fish finder. Furthermore, not only speed, but depth. So even if you're not really marking that many fish, seeing the arcs is definitely a big help. But there's times where I catch fish where I haven't seen anything show up on the fish finder. And without a fish finder, you have no idea how deep you're fishing either. I know I seem to be stating the obvious, but what we're doing today, and what I've already done, is established a pattern. I'm catching fish in, 10 to 12 feet of water on the Missouri crankbaits. So you gotta also have a fish finder so you know how deep you are, so you can establish that pattern. Otherwise, it's gonna be a shot in the dark as to where the fish are, how fast you're going, etc. There's very specific speeds to where you can catch stripers or other things. For example, if we were in August fishing for Spanish mackerel, we want to make sure our speed is up over 4 miles an hour. But for striper, you want to be between 2.5 and it's a very max 4 miles an hour, depending on your situation. But today, with it still being winter, I'm really wanting to hold to like between 2.5 and 2.8. And without a fish finder, I would have no idea how fast I'm going.
What's up? It's Tommy here from Chesapeake Outdoor Sports. First video here, and I was asked to do a 5-tip segment on carp fishing. Why not, right? Everybody likes carp fishing. Well, not everybody, but maybe you should give it a shot. Give it a chance. Tip number 1, finding the right water. Most water has carp in it in Maryland. Believe it or not, there's only a handful of spots that I went that did not have carp in them, but most of them do, but not all equal. Some are overabundant of smaller fish, like the Eastern Shore, for instance, has a lot of shallow water with tons and tons of fish under 10 pounds. A lot of fun still with the right tackle. Tip number 2, baiting up, aka chumming. Just like you would for rockfish, chumming is very similar in a carp game. Get a lot of bait out there, get the fish feeding, and get them active and trick them with your hook and bait. Third tip, the right tackle and gear. Medium heavy bass rod is perfect if you don't have the European stuff, which are like 12-foot rods that are designed for carp fishing. You want something a little bit longer to get that little bit of a flex at the tip, a little softer tip, a little forgiving tip. So when that fish takes off, you don't have so many hook pulls. Tip number 4, proper fish care. Very important. Take care of these fish just like you would a largemouth bass. Use the new rubberized catch and release nets. They're perfect for all species, including carp. And wet hands always, handling fish properly, letting them go. Don't slam them in the water. Quick, easy release is good. Lower them back into the water. Carry them slightly to the ground. Fifth and final tip, most important probably, is taking mental notes or written notes, or even better, video, just like I am with this GoPro. Learn from your outings, and hopefully each time you jot something down that you realize that, hey, it was an outgoing tide. It was I was killing them on corn and not so much on boilies or the bait you used, what rigs you take pride in your fish, measure them, take pictures, you know, and you know, despite the negative comments that you may have heard over the years, carp are a very sought after game fish over in Europe and England especially, where people pay big bucks to fish for these prized fish that grow to ginormous size.
Mic check 1 2 1 2. What is going on, you all? My name is Brandon. Some of y'all might know me as the Baltimore Angler, aka TBA. And today I'm doing something a little different. I'm filming my segment of something that is in the works with some other YouTubers and local Maryland anglers. And today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite catfishing rigs, and that is a Santee Cooper rig. Santee Cooper rig is a rig used in catfishing that is designed to suspend your bait off the bottom of where you're fishing, the body of water that you're fishing. This is a shortened down version of my Santee Cooper rig. All right, this green line right here, that represents the main line on a fishing pole. On your main line, you connect a sinker to a fish finding rig, aka a sliding sinker rig, and this just helps your weight to move around. Then I use a Palomar knot to connect it to the main swivel, and then from there I use a cow hitch knot or an overhand knot to attach a leader to the other portion of the swivel. Now let's talk about the leader. You want to use anywhere from 12 to 18 inches, sometimes 2 feet, sometimes 3 feet, just depending on where you're fishing and your preferences. But you want to use a 50-pound mono leader, and I believe I have 50-pound test mono Trilene big game line for my leader. And of course you want to attach a float to your leader so that way it actually suspends the bait off of the bottom. A lot of guys, they like to use Demon Dragons because of the rattle action that they have. They also make noise along with float. And then just snell on a hook. And then the hook I use for all catfishing is a 9/0 Team Catfish octopus hook. I'm sorry. And that, in a nutshell, is a Santee Cooper rig. All right. Now, what you'll typically see, especially down in the southern portion of the United States, you get a lot of guys, instead of using a pyramid sinker or no roll sinker, they'll actually attach peg sinkers, which is about a few inches long. And what happens is it's designed to stand up so it suspends the bait off of the bottom of the water even more. So again, that's just the Santee Cooper rig, man. All right. So y'all take care. I'll see y'all later. All right.